Hey guys, Cannibal Crab here, aka Patrick. I'm gonna start doing some new things, these react videos where I take mostly gaming stuff in my opinion, because that's what I enjoy the most, and I'm gonna pull you up some articles and show you some facts about them and then react to them, and I hope you like them, and if you do, definitely leave a like and a comment on what I should do next. This week's video is actually going to be on something that I'm very passionate about, and it's going to be mostly my opinion on some things, but if you feel differently, definitely leave a comment and let me know. Yeah, so let's get right into it. You ever get that feeling around Christmas time where you write this huge Christmas list, like this massive thing, and you get all these things on it, like, you know, Xbox or a PS4, maybe a new computer or a couple games or whatever, and you give it to your parents, you're like, hey mom, hey dad, like this is what I want, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll get you that, and you're like, oh sweet, that's awesome, and you get super excited, and then Christmas time comes, and you run downstairs and you're ready to open your presents, and you get like socks. What else do you guys want? Like a banana or guacamole or something, like something you just didn't have on your list and you didn't want. And well, remember that feeling, because that's what happens when game producers hype up a game and then it just sort of dies. Like it doesn't live up to its standards. And so we're gonna look at 5 games today that have done that for me personally, but for a lot of people as well. And if you feel the same way, leave a comment, let me know. And if you feel like there's a game that should be on this list that I didn't add, definitely leave that in the comments and I'll take a look into it. The first game that we're gonna take a look at is probably one of the, it's probably one of the biggest ones that has had this happen to, and that is No Man's Sky. And if you guys remember, No Man's Sky was huge a couple years ago. It was massive. Everybody was talking about it. Everyone wanted to play it. There were so many promises made about it, and then when the game released, it just didn't live up to its standards. It was nothing like what they pictured, what they imagined. It was nothing like what was talked about. Everything that was promised wasn't quite exactly there. So yeah, let me show you guys some things that were promised that were just missing in the general game itself. So if you take a look at this article over here that I found, it talks about a lot of the things that were missing from the game that were promised in the release trailers. Stuff like giant sandworms, huge shipwrecks, low sweeps across the landscape. Another big thing that was promised with this game was massive multiplayer, like the ability to meet other people and interact with them, and there was none of that. There was a lot of missed stuff in the game that would have made it a huge hit right off the bat if it was implemented correctly. Now, I have to give the game producers some credit because they have stuck with this, and over the years they've updated it and they've come out with some pretty amazing updates. And if you have the time and the money, definitely check this game out, because I think it's really starting to take shape and really starting to become a game that a lot of people could enjoy. I mean, I've still played it frequently enough and I'm really enjoying it myself. So definitely take a look at it. Just at the time of release, it was nothing like what was promised, and it was a huge letdown for myself and a lot of people worldwide as well. So second game maybe isn't as well known as the first one, but it's definitely on my list of games that flopped on release. So Evolve was this great game that was promised to be a 4-person hunter against one monster, and it was multiplayer, it was huge, it was hyped, and I was really excited for it to come out. But when it came out, there were some little bugs that should have been fixed before release that kind of just made it a dead game, and now you don't really hear it talked about much because it's not as widely played anymore. I mean, after all of this, the producers did release a free version online, so you can definitely go and play that, so it no longer costs money, and I think that is a huge help for the game. But here are a couple things that probably should have been fixed before the release of the game. So this article here is a great example of all the things that were missing at the release time, and some things that just sort of generally went wrong. Stuff like the DLCs were too aggressive and too early on. They should have fixed the game first before trying to release DLCs for it. There's stuff like the monster being third person, blocking some abilities, making it pretty difficult to use those abilities and fight as the monster. Other stuff like the monster being too easy to track. There was no subtle hints or anything. It was all just simply following the monster and the giant prompt on screen to find it. There was no tracking involved, no tracking necessary. So there were some things about this game that just didn't quite live it up to what it was hyped to be, and I feel like it's a huge letdown in that sense, because it had amazing potential, amazing ability to be a great game, and it never got there. like it was promised to be. Third game on our list is going to be For Honor. Many of you might not know this title, but it was really huge for me because I remember a friend talking about it really excitedly back before it came out. He was extremely hyped about this and really excited for it to come out because it promised a lot, and he played it and he loved it, but there's a few things about it that just kind of killed it, and now it's not as widely played. There's a great video on YouTube that we're going to take a look at that points out some of the obvious combat problems, but there's more to it than that. There's obvious difference in power levels between a lot of the characters, and no matter how much the community screamed for balancing out these issues, the developers never really listened to the community, my goodness. And for that reason, it just sort of died because people started to leave because the developers weren't listening to what the community wanted. They also pushed for you to buy the DLC so that you could get the stronger characters, and kind of made it a sort of pay to win in a sense. Not really, but if you got those extra characters, you would have some moves that had no risk with them, so you could just use them without taking any damage basically. And that's kind of unfair in these kinds of games where all the champions or heroes or whatever you want to call them should be pretty balanced out and pretty well fought, so that it takes more skill than anything else in how you use the champion to make you win. It was really poor on the developers' part to not really listen to the community and what they had to say. Like, if you're gonna make a game and you're gonna produce it, you should take the feedback from the community, because they're the ones that are playing it and they're the ones that find these problems, find these bugs, and want the changes, and you want to keep them happy as much as possible. So it kind of is the developer's fault in this one that the game died so quickly. But let's take a look at this video and see what this person has to say about the game.
The combat system in For Honor is designed for one-on-one engagements, just like Dark Souls. That's why when you lock on, the gameplay space zooms in and your inputs change. In that one-on-one space, the combat system feels open, complex, and very, very satisfying because you have the ability to concentrate fully on your opponent. It's something that honestly resembles an actual sword fight. Everything must be considered: spacing and weapon range, movement speed and power, and timing. It's great fun and the best part of For Honor. However, when you move into modes with minions or multiple players, all of that changes. The maps are small, just too small, and the fighting that takes place within them becomes claustrophobic and sometimes very chaotic. Players will surround you no matter how good you are. You'll rub shoulders with minions everywhere, and often attack unwanted targets due to how cluttered the fighting becomes in those minion mosh pits. Worse, you lose the mental component of dueling, the brightest points of For Honor's combat system. You're incentivized to gang up on unsuspecting players, fight only when you have more teammates than your opponent does, sneak around to objectives and surprise, swarm and push people off ledges or castle walls, and frankly just be a menace. And because every fight you take should be lopsided, you don't even have to take the combat system seriously. It's such a huge jump from the intimate sword fighting present in duel mode. This can create a big problem underneath the hood for Honor. When a game has inconsistent gameplay experiences, players start to segregate into smaller communities. Players who only play Dominion, people who only play Duel, etc. Players will favor one over the other. It's similar to how player bases get split up in AAA shooters like COD or Battlefield when DLC is added. Of course, For Honor doesn't do this intentionally, however the side effect remains clear to see. And when players start flooding different gameplay modes, these smaller niche groups have to compete against each other when Ubisoft considers tweaking the combat system, overhauling game mechanics, or buffing or nerfing combat stats. The main problem is that, unlike other games, Ubisoft will not be able to satisfy different groups of players with a combat system that's clearly better designed for smaller game modes such as Duel.
Downward Thrust, who is the creator of this YouTube video, does a great job of pointing this out, and he compares it to Dark Souls in a sense. And now some of you may know, but Dark Souls is actually my all-time favorite games, and he's very right. The PvP is very personal in games where it's one-on-one and you have to take everything into consideration when you go to fight your opponent. And that's very important in games like this. And I love that about Dark Souls, and I would have loved that about For Honor as well if they had implemented it in the more multiplayer setting. But he's right when he says that the maps are too small and it's more about just ganging up on your opponent than really fighting them one-on-one, which would have made the game really amazing. And he goes on to say a lot more about the problems in the combat, but that's really big for me personally, the whole one-on-one PvP thing. Like sure, in Dark Souls, mostly Dark Souls 3 nowadays, you'll get jumped by upwards of 2 people, but there's always that aspect of somebody else coming to join you, and the Dark Souls community is very much about, or is very honorable, I guess I should say, where you can have those one-on-one combats, those one-on-one, even when there's multiple people that are trying to fight you, they'll take a seat and they'll let you do your fight, and then they'll fight you. And that's not a community that you have here, where the people will just jump on you, gang up, and push you over ledges, kill you, backstab you, everything. So For Honor would have done a great thing if they had made it more one-on-one and not just a huge claustrophobic mass of bodies that you're trying to kill. And he does a great job of pointing that out, and I really think he hits the nail right in the head with that one.
A stamina bar is most certainly necessary, but the limitations put on you while you have little to no stamina feel underwhelming. You can still guard on low stamina, and it regenerates a little bit too quickly. This means that players who get their asses kicked simply roll and scurry away, regenerate their stamina within a few seconds, and then sprint for capture points to get healed. I want to see more punishment put on players for failing to properly use the stamina and combat systems in For Honor, and restrict them from fully healing at capture points. Maybe put a soft limit to 80% of your total HP. This would force players to take their health points seriously and avoid burnout stalemates from occurring in matches. The importance of mentioning that is because the stamina bar design amplifies the problems associated with the combat system in multiplayer matches. Having such a lenient stamina meter offers you even more leeway to playing recklessly, giving players the choice to ignore the complexity of the combat system altogether. It creates an environment where players run in carelessly, get wounded and hobble away to regen their stamina behind minions, and then bolt in the direction of the nearest capture point. They then get healed, turn around, and do it all over again. I understand healing and tactical retreating are viable options in battle, but they shouldn't be so readily encouraged, nor so easy to exploit, and worse, incentivize such reckless use of a very refined combat system.
Again, he makes a great point about the stamina bar. When you run out of stamina, you shouldn't be able to just retreat, regen it, re-health, and then run back in. I'm going to do a lot of comparing between the For Honor battle system and Dark Souls, because the fighting is very similar in the sense that there's a stamina bar, it's very open-ended on what you can do, how you attack and stuff like that, and it's just got a lot of similarities. So I'm going to do a lot of comparing for that sense. In Dark Souls, when you run out of stamina, you can't block, you can't run, and if you try to block and you get staggered, you lose a massive amount of health if you don't die. So it's really problematic when you run out of stamina, and managing your stamina bar is a huge part of the combat and a huge part of the game itself. And in For Honor, I feel like they just put the stamina bar in for cosmetics, like, hey look, we have a stamina bar, but when you run out of stamina, you don't really lose anything. As Downward Thrust says, you can still block and you can just retreat and re-health. Like, you can run back to the nearest point and go back to full HP. If they fixed this and made it so that you could only get to maybe 75-80% like he says, that'd be pretty great, because it still puts a limit on how much health you can get and still makes your health points valuable in a sense, and still makes you want to like maybe save some stamina and like understand how to use it. But I feel like there's just no point in it. You can just go in and attack as much as you want and retreat when you run out of stamina or run out of health, and just go back to a save point or a capture point and heal up. He does a really amazing job of pointing out that problem, and hopefully they can fix that, and hopefully that they make stamina worth it.
Finally, I want to talk about how in-game perks clash with the combat system in For Honor and create imbalances in player experience. In For Honor, you can choose a set of perks called FEATS, akin to how you would select loadout options in a Call of Duty, for instance. You may choose active skills such as an AoE damage attack, healing spells, or abilities that lower your opponent's defenses or buff surrounding allies, etc. You can also choose passive bonuses instead, such as increased defense, adding healing to successful blocks, or even be able to sprint on an empty stamina meter. This should immediately raise some red flags. After all, For Honor's combat system is once again built for one-on-one engagements, and by having abilities that potentially make players stronger or weaker than others, you can never truly have a fair fight. There's no way to balance a one-on-one combat system with an additional perk system slathered on top that has so many variables.
The final problem that he has with For Honor's combat system is probably one of the biggest ones for me as well, because having such perks in a game like that where the combat is meant to be one-on-one PvP, it really imbalances the game. It imbalances the characters that you play as, making it so that you can easily be stronger than anybody else and just be invulnerable. In that last clip where you saw that one person fighting 3 people, he's doing much better than the 3 because he can just go invulnerable for a period of time and it doesn't look like there's a long cooldown, as he does it twice in the span of 20 seconds, if that. So these perks aren't really something that add to the gameplay, but they really take away from it because they destroy the combat system in the sense that your stamina bar still doesn't matter, your health doesn't matter, you can be invulnerable, you can have AoE attacks, and you can just, it's basically like a cheat to the game. And I feel like if they removed those perks or made them something that weren't as powerful, like maybe just passive health raising or better defense, better attacks, stuff like that, it would still be good and it would help the game a lot, because then you would choose like, oh, I'm a defensive kind of player, I want to have high defense, or maybe like I'm an aggressive player, I want to raise my attack, or maybe you find that you lose your health too quickly during a game, so you want to increase the amount of health you have. And if they ever fix the stamina, maybe you want more stamina, so you could just deal out a lot of attacks. So For Honor's combat system has a lot that it needs to work on, and I feel like if the developers listen to the community and really work on it, it'll be a great game, and I feel like they'll do a really good job of that. But there's no sign of them ever listening to the community, so I'm not getting my hopes too high for that. The next game we're going to look at is Destiny 1. And a lot of you might be thinking, Destiny 1, that was a great game, and I agree, it is a great game. I played it myself, I absolutely loved the game. But coming from the same company that made Halo, there are some things that they should have done a lot better in Destiny. For starters, the mobs don't really add up. In Halo, you get chased, flanked, outgunned, outmatched by all the enemies there, but in Destiny, you can just leave the zone and they walk back to their starting position. Like, what happened? Where did they go? Why isn't this still a thing? Because in Halo, that was amazing. You never knew what was going to happen, who was going to come up behind you, what was going to kill you next, and that was just a great feeling, knowing that that battlefield was really like a battlefield and not just sort of a hit and run, wear down the enemy health until it dies sort of thing. And don't get me wrong, this isn't like I have nothing against Destiny. I love the game. I think the game was amazing, and I played Destiny 2 now that it's out as well. There's just some things that I think the company really could have done better with in Destiny that really sort of let it flop for me personally. Another big thing that really sort of was sort of iffy in Destiny was the PvE and the PvP. In the PvE, you would grind for hours trying to kill these bosses, finish these dungeons, and get the loot, but it wouldn't translate over to PvP, so none of your achievements would really be achievements. They would just be there for the PvE, and then the PvP, the player versus player, everybody would be evened out and you'd be put on the same standing as everyone else. Like that legendary gun that you worked so hard to get didn't really matter at all unless you were playing in the PvE. In the PvP environment, it just wasn't there anymore, and I feel like they really should have made it so that that translated over and you really were able to show off your achievements in the PvP. You're able to show like, hey, I worked hard for this and now I get to use it, instead of having everything just sort of on a level playing field. I mean, I get why they did it, so that new players who weren't really interested in the PvE could play the PvP, but I feel like it would have made a lot more people appreciate the PvE and the long time it's spent trying to get everything, because no real tough enemies were presented in Destiny. It was more just a grind to kill them, and that was another major problem with it, because it just took a lot of time, really. It was time consuming, and I mean, sure, the loot was great and what you got from it, but as there was no real reason to use the loot outside of the PvE, it just sort of made it not worth it, in my sense, to really grind those long hours to get that loot if I couldn't use it in the PvP, which was what I enjoyed doing the most. So if they really made it so that the PvE achievements and what you got from them translated over to the PvP, I feel like the game would have flourished a lot more than it already did. I mean, it's a huge game as is, but it would have been much bigger in my sense if those achievements actually carried over. There's this great debate on the Halo website about Halo versus Destiny PvP, and a lot of Halo players are upset with the PvP and what is brought to it in Destiny, and they wish it was more like Halo PvP. And if you want to take a read through it, definitely do. I recommend it. I spent a lot of time trolling through it and seeing what I could find, and there's a lot of good points made in all of this. The last game we're going to look at today is probably one that everybody has heard about because it was probably the biggest mess up ever in the history of gaming, especially for such a big company like this. And I'm sure you all know exactly what game I'm talking about because you've probably been waiting to hear it on this list, and that is Star Wars Battlefront 2. This game was gonna be huge, like absolutely massive for what EA promised. And then when it came out, it was destroyed, absolutely demolished by microtransactions in the game. I don't think microtransactions belong in any game unless it's on your phone kind of game, because people want to be able to work for these things and unlock them. And yeah, that's available in Star Wars Battlefront 2, but it would take upwards of a couple thousand hours to unlock what everybody was looking for, which was, I'm pretty sure, Darth Vader, which everybody wanted to play as. And there's a great article here estimating the amount of hours and money it would take to even possibly unlock Darth Vader. And EA kind of messed this one up by making it too much. It was unreasonable, and since then I've heard that they patched it and made it better, but at release it just destroyed the game and gave it bad rep right from the beginning. So a lot of players didn't really get interested in it because it seemed impossible to unlock what everybody wanted. And just to give you an idea, it was estimated at 4,500 hours to unlock everything in the game. 4,500 hours. That's a lot of hours to play a game. I think the max hours I have on any game is like 600 or 700 hours on Dark Souls, and I play that game religiously, like almost every day, sort of religiously. Like I play that game a lot, and I've only got like 700 hours on it, and you expect me to play 4,500 hours to unlock everything in Star Wars Battlefront 2? That's ridiculous. And I think it was $2,000 to unlock everything. Who has $2,000? So either you spend $2,000 or you spend 4,500 hours trying to unlock everything in this game. And that was just distasteful to a lot of people. A lot of people just couldn't handle that, and I agree with them. That is really, really bad on the company that made it. So definitely that got fixed, and that's amazing on the company's part that they listened to the people. And there's a really great Reddit post if you want to look at it, the company trying to explain why they did what they did, and it's the most downvoted comment in Reddit history, so take a look at it. If not, I'll show it right here. It's really funny listening to the company try to talk its way out of this and just the response from the community, but they've made it better. And definitely check out the game if you get the chance. It is good. I've heard a lot about it. I haven't played it myself, never really got into the Star Wars franchise. I just know about all the fallout that happened with EA because it was such a huge title. So yeah, if you like this video, definitely leave a like, leave a comment, and let me know what you guys think I should do next time for one of these videos. Cannibal out.